Hello and welcome to The Master's Voice, the podcast series on Mediabrief.com. I'm your host and friend Pavan Chawla, and I'm delighted to inform you that in this episode, I have one of FM radio's finest professionals from India. B. Surendar, Chief Operating Officer and Director, Red FM Network, who has been instrumental in the growth of the Red FM network for the past 15 years. Surendar, welcome to the episode.
Hi, Pavan. It's a pleasure to be on this show. I've been watching the quality of this show. It's been really good.
Wow, coming from a top radio professional, that is high praise indeed. So thank you very much indeed, Surendar. Before we get on to the business end of our chat, where I'm going to be fishing for insights for professionals and peers alike, and also youngsters and aspiring professionals in radio, allow me to do you the courtesy of introducing you, Surendar, to my listeners. So, by your leave, here goes. My guest in this episode of The Master's Voice is B. Surendar, Chief Operating Officer and Director, Red FM Network. One of the thought leaders in the FM radio industry in India, Surendar has been playing an important role in shaping the success of Red FM radio network in India over the past 16 years. Red FM network has grown by leaps and bounds from a network of 7 stations in 2005 to nearly 70 stations now, spread across the country and reaching around 52 million listeners. During his 25 years plus of senior management experience in the media industry, Surendar has earned peer respect as a turnaround specialist by handling tough assignments with aplomb and consistently achieving top and bottom line objectives of the companies he has worked with. Surendar is active in industry forums and has been a part of many award-winning initiatives for the network. He's also known for his penchant for building teams, mentoring revenues, and maintaining high standards of business ethics and integrity across everything that he does. Surendar is an MBA in marketing and had a stint with pharma MNCs Organon and Hoffmann La Roche before moving to the media industry in 1996. His personal interests, they include world affairs, sports, movies, music, and traveling. And right now, here he is with me, your host and friend Pavan Chawla in The Master's Voice, the podcast series of Mediabrief.com. Thank you, Surendar, once again for joining this show. Your presence will surely make it very special.
It's my pleasure, Pavan. It's really my pleasure. It's been a great show and I want to be a part of it.
Wonderful. And thanks also to Rashmi Sundar Raj, who has been extremely helpful in making this possible. So, Surendar, I did read a very brief profile of yours, but honestly, I'd also like to have a little more insight into, the personal plus the professional, your education focus, early career progression, etc. Really, give us some insights on that.
Yep, Pavan. I actually surprisingly wanted to be an engineer. I think going by career prospects, at that time, I was aiming to be an engineer, and but ended up being a chemistry grad. More by chance rather than by choice, even though I did well in chemistry in graduation and probably won a few awards in chemistry as well as the best outgoing student. Somehow I didn't want to pursue my higher studies in chemistry. I thought my specialization was lying somewhere else. So I decided to go for work. I worked with 2 pharma MNCs, Hoffmann La Roche and Organon, for around 4 to 5 years. Both are good original research companies who believed in a lot of training, not just induction training, but also in-depth product training and communication skills training. Particularly Hoffmann La Roche gave a lot of excellent communication skills trainings. And I'm proud of that experience because the pharma multinationals had very high standards those days. And Roche was among the top of the giant MNCs from pharma industry. And it was an enriching experience. But actually, the turning point, I would say, was when I decided to pursue MBA. And it's good that I wanted to pursue MBA, after working for some time, because I clearly knew what exactly I had to learn.
So great career to start with in pharma. What was the turning point for you?
Turning point was deciding to do my MBA. The good thing is, after a few years of WorkX, when you do an MBA, Pavan, you know very clearly what to learn and what are the practical implications. The applications part of learning. So I was very, very conscious of that and I'm very happy I pursued MBA that way. not the usual typical university marks focused approach, but completely professional approach looking at applications. And MBA was a subject I learned when I did it, that this is a subject I wanted to do and wanted to pursue a career with. And one of the main learnings, Pavan, is the thing I learned that the main goal that I need to have in an organization is to optimize the wealth of the stakeholders or owners of the organization. I really thought once you do that, everything falls in place. There were other sub goals. I did want to do a few other things. I wanted to become a CEO even at that time, and wanted to grow people working under me. But the main goal was to optimize wealth for the stakeholders of the company. I thought this put the whole thing in perspective for my career going forward.
And what happened? Did radio happen immediately after you got out of the MBA Marketing Institute for a job in the market?
Not really. I actually had 3-4 options, but ended up in media by choice. I really wanted to get into media, and that time it was the Indian Express Bombay Group, Mumbai Group, and I had this opportunity in Bangalore where it could be the branch head there, and I picked up that opportunity, and I thought I did the right thing because media is such a exciting career. I mean, not a single boring day in your life. At the end of the day, you get a kick.
Yeah, and the Indian Express has given a lot of excellent professionals to radio specifically. In fact, another dear friend of mine, whom I count amongst my friends as I do you, is Abe Thomas of Big FM, and he also sort of cut his teeth in the Indian Express, but in Mumbai.
Right. I worked in Express in South, and then I was sent to Delhi on an assignment. That time Abe had left Express. Around the time I was leaving, I was sent to North. I was heading north and central part of the company, the regions north and central part of Indian Express. And that was a really good experience working, in close contact with not just the sales team and the business teams in a big city like Delhi. And I got Delhi at the right time when it was really growing big. And also working closely with reputed editors. I mean, Shekhar Gupta was not only the editor-in-chief, but also the group CEO that time.
Yeah.
And also Dr. Sanjay Baru was the editor of Financial Express. I used to work very closely with them when I was in Delhi.
Excellent. So, before we get on to the radio part of, our chat, you want to tell me, since we're just coming out of this entire progression of yours from non-radio, from pharma, from a chemistry grad to marketing and the media, what are the 2 or 3 qualities that you would look for in anyone who wants to say, hey, Mr. Surendar, I want to work with you in this very difficult platform or vertical, which is radio? Because if you can survive in radio, you can thrive in any other medium.
That's true.
So what are the, 2 or 3 qualities or attitudes or traits or whatever? I mean, you see, educational qualifications will be there. Without that, no HR person will send someone to speak to you.
Right.
But qualities?
Qualities, 2 things. One is adapting to a changing environment, particularly in the current COVID impacted scenario. And also, I think ability to visualize the future. I mean, when you're looking at, when you're in the middle of the pandemic, it's easy to be gloomy and have a slightly negative mindset.
Right.
But it's very important to come out of it and visualize what would October look like, what would a festival season look like. I mean, you need to really visualize everything. I mean, providing content to the listeners has been a very positive experience. But in terms of building revenues and maintaining the viability of the company, ensuring the viability of the company, so there I feel these qualities, they matter a lot. I think the ability to adapt and also to visualize the future, very, very important.
Right. So, Surendar, you mentioned the pandemic's impact in, these pandemic impacted times. So, I feel that radio has been very badly hit during the pandemic. And in fact, that in spite of the fact and despite the fact that it was perhaps the sole really not fake news infested kind of medium which really kept people informed and positive in these tough times. Nevertheless, it hasn't, to my mind, received any support from the government and, what more. So tell me, how did the pandemic impact the radio industry?
Actually, I'll give 2 dimensions of it. One is radio's approach to listeners. I'm in the listener angle. I'm extremely proud to be a part of the radio industry because, they say that radio is the lifeblood of emergency communication. Whenever there is a crisis or a natural disaster, not only in India, across the world, radio is one of the first mediums which comes up. I remember clearly the Vizag cyclone. Red FM was perhaps the only medium. Not even telecom was alive. Communication was alive, and only Red FM was there. And so much work we could do, closely connecting with the CM's office and telling who's holding prizes to a lot of things we could coordinate closely. And even this pandemic, I was a witness to a lot of good work, a lot of connecting people, servicing their requirements, other than talking to experts, other than, allaying fears of the listeners. Facilitating services and informing people and connecting them to the right authorities when they are stranded. There are so many touching emotional stories during this pandemic in various cities across. So I'm really extremely proud that, as you rightly said, radio is known for credibility and people trust it. Radio and the radio jockeys, people have a lot of faith. And I think in India, lived up to it during the pandemic, and I'm very proud of it.
So that was how Red FM and radio actually really empowered and informed listeners. What about the other angle that you said you would be talking about? Tell us about that.
That's the advertisers. From the advertiser angle, we belong to the service industry and our fate is connected to the other businesses and how well they do. That way, since a lot of industries were affected, radio also got affected. We were moving towards full recovery. I think we had a pretty good time in the second half of the year. I think Jan to March, we were recovering. We were close to around 90% of our FY 1920 turnover. But when the second wave came and hit, I really thought this time it was very severe, the second wave, but it was also swift. It left with the same speed with which it came, and thankfully we are recovering quite well now. I would say this festival season has been pretty good for us, and we are very positive and looking forward.
Excellent. So radio has always played a very, very important role. It's extremely, extremely important. It's the poor man's medium because it comes to them free of cost. And despite all of that, even in its birth DNA was embedded that terrible monstrosity called the license fees. There are so many other challenges. DAVP will give it ads but will not pay it for long, prolonged periods. And it's just not right, if you ask me. And these are my words, not yours. But tell me about the need to evangelize the medium and what are the myths about radio? Today there is no measurement also. And radio is sold a lot on perception. Only 4 cities being measured is a little bit of a, travesty. And when a readership survey actually tries to measure listenership, it's a little strange. But nevertheless, you don't have to comment on those specific aspects. Just tell me, what are the myths about radio and, the need to evangelize the medium?
The license fee issue was sorted out a year I joined the industry. It was quite early in 2005 or so. And then I think there were some issues with music royalty and everything. That also got sorted out. And I thought we were on a long, good ride. I thought starting from around after phase 2 happened, I think 2007 to around 2018-19, we had a very good run. We were always growing in double digit. I think things were extremely good. Things slowed down a little in 1920 when the government spends in particular came down that year. But otherwise, things were still fine before the pandemic. I think phase 3 expansion went quite all right. We have expanded into new cities and those cities have accepted radio very well. Because, people took to FM radio extremely well. Coming to myths and evangelizing the medium,
yes.
I definitely would like to comment on it. I think radio as a medium needs to be understood a lot better in India because, the biggest inspiration comes from US. In US, unlike what people think, radio degrew the least after digital last year in 2020 and even this year. Radio degrew much lesser than all the other traditional media and was next only to digital and did extremely well in terms of listenership because the Nielsen study said that 92% of 18 plus listeners tuned into radio
Wow.
during the pandemic. This is during the pandemic, and 83% of the total surveyed said that they are listening either equal or more. And the first myth is about radio listening during the pandemic. I think there is enough listening happening in India. Also, there was surveys done by ARY, and the results were very positive. Other than television watching, it was radio listening which really went up during the. Unlike other traditional media, radio listening went up. All the surveys point to increased listenership. I think one of the myths probably which held back a bit of spends on radio, the thing that radio is listened to mainly in cars. I think while car listenership is a very important part of radio listenership, it's not a very dominant part. I think at-home listenership has always been very high. And the majority of the listenership happens through mobile phones. And it can be at home, it can be outside, but at-home listenership is very dominant. And when we did the survey in India also, a little bit of car listenership had come down, like it had happened in US, and at-home listenership had gone up. And that doesn't mean the medium is not working, because the best of professionals were working from home. So the at-home listenership going up for radio is a very positive thing. I really thought it wasn't understood enough at that time.
At the same time, I must add here that I don't have any hardware to listen to traditional radio FM broadcast at home. And I do believe that morning and evening drive prime segments are very, very big for advertising. So another problem area that I see, which is just a challenge for at home or on the go listening of radio, is that on most of today's smartphones, which are in the medium to high range, radio is not an embedded app. Of course, once the lockdown closes completely and ends and wheels come back, it will be fabulous growth, because already the off-wheel, off-drive listenership has gone up, revenues have gone up, as you've said.
It is.
But if only the industry could get together and go to all the smartphone operators. But then again, you have the streaming platforms and smartphone owner platforms which are offering things on pay-per-view or whatever S-word kind of music stuff. So it's a bit of a tussle, isn't it?
Number one, I think thankfully the car listenership is back, and advertising on radio is also back.
Great.
In the big cities, it's still catching up because they had faced a more severe impact of COVID. But otherwise, I think it is back in most of the places, and radio listening remains extremely strong, even abroad, where there are so many avenues to listen. And radio listening, as I said just now, 92% of 18 plus was listening to radio during the COVID pandemic throughout. And
internationally.
Internationally. And even in India, the survey said the listenership was up by around 20 to 30%. So, there is no shortage of listenership, and, and it'll be desirable if some of the higher end phones also have radio, and I'm sure as our association would definitely be interested in taking it up with some of the manufacturers, because the main thing here is the demand. The demand from listeners is extremely strong for FM radio. That hasn't come down by any chance. It's only going up, and it is about negotiating or making them understand the importance of doing it.
Absolutely.
I know you have the welfare of radio industry in mind when you're pointing this out, and I think we as an association of operators, we should take it up and make it an integral part of a radio handset.
Absolutely.
It's important to make radio an integral part of the mobile handset. So we'll try our best to do that.
Absolutely. More strength to you. And, AROI and Red FM has always been one of the leading channel radio networks, which has always worked very closely with AROI. I'm aware of that, and tried to empower it and support it together with all the other leaders in the space. So that's great. I wanted to ask you next about, present and future prospects of radio, global and India. But connected with that is one very, very important trend that one has witnessed. Radio is making that, let's say, spreading itself from traditional to digital in a very strong way. And a lot of radio networks are trying NTR. I do not actually have too much faith in non-traditional revenues for radio because there are enough competitors on the digital space. Tell me about radio's transition to digital. And of course, I think the meat and potatoes of all the revenues and listenership is definitely going to be on ground with the traditional radio broadcast. But just share your views and insights on this.
Yep. Pavan, a little on the previous question, I'll first add before I get into this particular question of yours.
Sure.
I mean, the evangelizing part. I mean, it's not just being a part of the mobile hardware. It is also, there are so many other ways of evangelizing the medium. I feel the Radio Advertising Bureau, which operates in many of the developed countries and even developing countries like South Africa, have done a great job. I mean, a country like India can easily relate to South Africa, and radio is doing excellent work, winning international awards. And, the medium of radio has been promoted extremely well through rap. And I do feel that kind of initiative. We are doing that in India. We did that once during the pandemic also. ARY came out with a campaign to promote radio. But I think on a more consistent basis, we radio operators will have to evangelize the medium. It's a beautiful medium, powerful medium, very, very relevant for today. But that needs to be conveyed, particularly to the advertising community. I think as far as the advertising community is concerned, there is a bit of a gap between what happens internationally and what happens in India. I mean, internationally, the share of radio in the ad pie hasn't really majorly come down compared to other traditional media. If you really see, radio and outdoor haven't really dropped after the digital, what should I say, a disruption or explosion on the media scene. Radio and OOH have been somewhere in the range of around 6 to 6.5% of the share of the ad pie, and they have remained there. They have not really dropped substantially. Even if you see the latest studies, I was just checking the Dentsu Global, take on ad spend, the study on ad spends. And radio, even last year, had 5.7 when all other traditional media dropped much more. And in fact, this year, 2021, internationally, newspapers and OOH both are supposed to get a lower share compared to radio. While radio is 5.7, they are slightly lower than radio. And I think that's mainly because people internationally have understood. In fact, radio is supposed to grow well. It's supposed to grow by more than 10%. In spite of doing comparatively better last year among the traditional media, the 2021 also it's supposed to grow in double digits. So there is nothing wrong with radio as a medium. It has traditional radio, it has the digital part, it has podcasting. The overall audio environment is extremely positive, and I think there is a lot of potential for the future in India, where we have not really fully tapped the potential of radio. And particularly from an advertiser point of view, it can be tapped better. And evangelizing is a necessity, not an option.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Nice, lot of details in that long reply, but very, very insightful. Thank you. I just want to also ask you, what about things like content? News is not allowed. You cannot actually do too much of syndicated or one center out content. And, there are so many limitations that are there on radio. So I'm going to ask you, when you talk about evangelizing, what are the 2 or 3 or 4 or 1 or whatever number of areas where you wish the government would support radio a little better?
I feel you said it. I think government has already taken the first step of allowing us to take bulletins from AAR and use it on news and current affairs. I think the next logical step hopefully would be to allow us to do news and current affairs, I'm sure, in the shorter run rather than in the long run. That government would look at doing that. That will help the medium grow a lot more. And I think otherwise government has been doing its bit, I think, in supporting radio. A lot of operational hiccups have been sorted out by the government. But this one step could be of great use.
When you talk about evangelizing, end of the day, what stops this industry, this subsector of media, which is so close to people, from actually pushing out for better measurements? Because ultimately it will always remain the poor little medium across the entire media mix in India? What is 4, 5, 6, 7% of the ADEX?
There is scope for better improvement on the measurement currency. I won't say there is no measurement currency, because IRS, even though it's a survey dedicated to newspapers, does cover the length and breadth of the country and does at least give an idea about the presence of radio brands and what they are in the cities across the country. I mean, it gives a fair idea. I would definitely say that's one reference point one can use in the current juncture till even more established currency comes in. In fact, a lot of end users are also using that. RAM is also available, even though it's available only in 4 cities, and there are some issues which are debated on RAM. But I'm saying these IRS in particular, because it's available all over India, I think it's a reliable, at least indicative currency on how radio players are doing, and does give an idea. But a more in-depth idea would be obtained with a better measurement currency. And the discussions have been on and off, and even now there are proposals to do it. I think the moment we agree on a single measurement currency, it will take the entire industry forward, all the players forward. I think we are looking forward to that. As one of the top 2 players in the industry, we are really looking forward.
Excellent. And I sincerely hope you can drive the entire industry along with you to fruition on that very, very specific and extremely critical ask of measurement.
The other point you were asking about the non-traditional revenue, having been exploring non-traditional revenues, I feel it's a very important part of radio revenues.
Okay.
And it's been working extremely well for radio. I mean, as the pandemic clears, we're already doing a lot of brand-driven events. We've started doing, particularly in Tier 2, Tier 3 cities where the pandemic issue is lesser. Of course, with all the precautions, we are trying to recognize. For example, we are trying to recognize the Red FM Business Brilliance Awards. We are giving away to business heroes during the COVID pandemic in the last 1 year. And that's been received very well. We've already done it in 2 cities, and we plan to do it in more. Number one, radio brands have trust and credibility, and I feel we are well positioned to do that. Recognize and give awards for such excellence during a very, very critical period for the country when the economy was really longing for a recovery, and a lot of, not necessarily the big business houses alone, but even the small and medium businessmen have done a great job in putting the country's economy back on wheels. And that's one of the reasons radio industry has also recovered quicker from the second wave impact. And I really feel non-traditional revenues on ground is a very important part of it. And we do music awards, we do a variety of awards, and short film awards, a variety of awards, and a lot of other on-ground initiatives, and doing music concerts. All those are very, very allied to our core function of delivering music. It also improves our engagement with our listeners through various platforms, and it's been well received, whatever we have done, and I feel radio players should continue to do that.
Right, that's on ground. What about digital?
Digital has enormous potential. I mean, one is in cashing on our content. I mean, being active on digital platforms, starting with social media. I mean, you'll be surprised to know our Facebook pages. If I take Red FM Kannada or Red FM India, which is Hindi, Red FM Telugu, or Red FM Malayalam, or Surendar FM Tamil, I mean, they're all in the top 10 world radio pages.
Wow.
Competing with, in terms of engagement, competing with High Heart Radio and top brands. I mean, for the top 3 slots.
Wonderful.
Because we are really doing intense work on our social media pages, and there is content monetization involved there, and there is also audience engagement. The digital audience are obviously different from the radio audience, but we can synergize the whole thing, and we are doing a great job of engaging them. And there are other platforms. I mean, YouTube involves monetization and also reaching variety of content to our listeners. We don't think only radio, we think radio plus. We think beyond radio. It's already moved into a audio kind of a approach and a specialization on audio. And sometimes you even get into video. I mean, I mean, when we are on social media platforms in particular, we think a lot of video also. I tell radio jockeys many a times that, it's not enough to be only audio jockeys. I mean, they have to transform, and many of them have transformed into very good video jockeys as well. I mean, they have to be comfortable in front of the camera. So, a lot of variety of activities can be done on the digital platform. One is the social media pages, and a lot of other options are also available. Podcasting is really another area which is waiting to be explored. It's already grown well internationally, and we are definitely exploring it in India. I think it's got tremendous future potential. And collaborating with other audio streaming companies is also another option which radio players are pursuing, and there's a lot of potential there. While everybody knows about the video revolution, I think quietly there is an audio revolution. I think radio continues to do very well internationally and in India, and also podcasting to music streaming to a variety of other options, including the availability of smart speakers. A lot of audio options are coming forward. As audio specialists, I mean, we have a lot of scope to encash, not only coexist with the other platforms, but also encash on these opportunities. As audio specialists, not only audio specialists, but also creative specialists.
Yes, I wanted to come on the creative side of things. Look, I have just one little problem with the manner in which the format of the RJ Speak is sort of predetermined everywhere. It's like one template. 15 seconds, not more than that. Come, speak, and get the hell out and quickly have music, etc. What happened to conversations?
Yeah, Pavan, I mean, it's usually not 15 seconds, and it's also not pre-recorded. Even during the pandemic, we made it a point to go live throughout. I mean, because people are requiring help. People are requiring help, and we were available 24/7 for people. And the links RJs do are usually not in seconds, it's in minutes. It depends on the merit of the content. If they have a lot of content to say, they can speak for multiple minutes.
Okay.
And usually they go live. And our Prime Minister also had a session with the radio jockeys in the peak of the pandemic, and Red FM RJs were a very active part of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Because they did a stellar job.
Absolutely.
Of connecting with the community. Not for nothing that they say radio is the oldest social media.
Right.
And, it connects with the community like very few media does. And because of that, I think they did a stellar job engaging. It was not just music. I think music, every time, of course, the main genre we operate in is music. But the radio jockeys were talking, and they were talking whenever they had useful, important content. They were talking. Yeah,
right. Point absolutely taken. This kind of evolution, unfortunately, was forced by the pandemic. But before that, it used to be a lot of slightly less and more of, songs to be airplayed in 1 hour. So that, because radio's time spent listening is always languished in the 4, 5, 6, 7 minute bracket somehow. And that hasn't gone up. But I'm sure that when we come back out of this pandemic, thanks to efforts of, stellar professionals and leaders like yourself, like your teams and Red FM and the other networks, it is going to come back with a bang, because people have actually sort of got radio now in their mental homepages.
Yes, Pavan, I think you may be right on that, but I think the time spent listening has been quite substantial, higher than 90 minutes usually. And I don't see a problem of time spent listening. And as we keep differentiating and working on improving our content, I'm sure it will improve further, the time spent listening. Yeah.
Right. Very interesting conversation so far, Surendar, for me. A lot of insights for me. My last question before we wind up is, you've had different phases of your career. In short, tell me, which of these phases of your career gave you, the maximum satisfaction? I guess it's going to be radio.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, radio, very close to my heart. And, I feel, Pavan, I always tell that those who work at the radio industry, if they don't like it, they decide within the first 1 year. Because, if you don't have a passion for the medium, you can't work in radio. And usually people take a call within a year. But if they stay at least a year in radio, then they very rarely leave that quickly. I mean, it's a very engaging medium, very interesting medium, and never a dull moment. As such, I said the same about media itself. I mean, my days with print media was also very engaging and interesting. And radio has been, it's been 16 years now, and it's been most interesting. And I would say when the crisis comes, it becomes even more interesting for you. I mean, the current pandemic or the 2008 slowdown or even the 2001 slowdown. I mean, I take a lot of pride in the kind of work we do as professionals around this time to keep the head above water.
Absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Surendar, you're such a self-effacing person. I've never heard you use superlatives in anything, and you're more circumspect and understated than most people I know. But you've done so much of wonderful work, so much of evangelizing, so much of network building, capacity building. I mean, careers get involved and grown, added to, and really great value to society and to enterprise. So you've really had a wonderful 16 years now in radio, and I wish you all the very best. I hope that you continue doing this great work. So tell me about our conversation so far. I've enjoyed it. What did you think about our little chat?
It was excellent. I mean, first of all, I've been tuning in frequently to your Master's Voice podcast series, and many of them you've been meeting a lot of people from a variety of industries, and I think the groundwork done, the detailing and the quality of the professionals met, I think gives a very good insight into those industries and into those companies. I really thought it was great, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to be on this. And this conversation, I mean, another important point is a kind of we require well-wishers for radio industry, and you're one of them. I have no doubt,
of course,
no doubt about it. And we, as I said, evangelizing the medium, which hasn't realized its full potential yet in India, I think is very important. And professionals like you are also required to push the concept further. Thanks, Pavan. Thanks for this.
You're most welcome, and thank you also to, once again, I must take the name Rashmi Sundarraj, who actually facilitated this whole thing. I must tell you this, though. You said you are someone who, I think you said you like radio, you support radio. I do. And that's why my episode series, this podcast series, is called The Master's Voice. Actually, it was about expert conversations with, peers and important leaders across. At the same time, it is also a throwback to my radio model way back when I was a kid. I used to listen to all the best songs with my dad on AIR. And that was HMV, his master's voice. So there's a bit of a meeting of
radio
both. Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you very much indeed once again, Surendar.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Pavan.
The Surendar, Chief Operating Officer and Director, Red FM Network, who has been instrumental in the growth of the network for the past 15 years now, in his 16th in radio alone, has been my distinguished guest on this episode of The Master's Voice on Mediabrief.com. Surendar is also someone I'm privileged to call a friend, and we seem to be kindred spirits in our love for radio and, all that he is doing with his entire brilliant team at Red FM. So that's all I have time for in this episode of The Master's Voice. Till we meet again in the next episode of The Master's Voice on Mediabrief.com, this is your host and friend Pavan Chawla saying, take care, stay safe, bajate raho. Bye-bye.